Hi everyone, this is Kathy Skipper and this is day 6 of my healing sugar addiction journey. And actually today is the last day that I'm going to be coming on every day and talking about my journey. And that's because I've had a huge realization. And I think really that I was pushed by my soul to come here and share with you my intentions and where I'm at in my journey. I had very little idea of where I'd get to, and I didn't realize how quickly I would get to this point of realization that in a way validifies everything that I've been working on for the last 20 years of my life. So that's what I want to share with you today. It's going to probably be a bit rambly as I get the words out to actually explain what I feel is really important about this work. So I'm just going to try it and bear with me. So the first thing that I realized I've been getting a lot of help, email messages and other messages on posts that I posted about things that can help me on this journey of sugar addiction. And they're great. I've actually made a sort of folder and put them all in there, and I'm working my way through sort of looking at them, researching them, trying them. And that's very valid and very important because I'm on a journey of changing my habits, changing my relationship to sugar and red wine. So thank you for all that. However, something was niggling at me. So I was coming on every day and sharing where I'm at. And that felt very empowering in the sense that I felt that I was being seen and beheld. And that was important for this sort of stepping off into this journey that has been the bane of my life, in the sense that I've tried numerous times to organize my relationship with sugar and red wine, let's say. And it's the one thing I've never managed to do. So this was huge. This was big for me. However, what I really realized, hang on, the phone's going. Okay. So what I really realized was that no matter how many diets or changes in my diet I make, no matter how many supplements I take to support those changes in my diet, no matter how many herbs I take or what I leave in, what I take out, if I don't deal with the underlying core issues, traumas, wounds from this lifetime and beyond, then whatever happens, even if I succeed in combating my desire for sugar, if I don't deal with the underlying issues, then either eventually, because I'll be using willpower, I'll come back to sugar, often in a bigger way than I left off. Smokers see that. When you stop smoking cigarettes through willpower and then the willpower breaks and you go back to smoking cigarettes, often you're smoking more than you were when you stopped. Or if I do succeed forever to combat the sugar in that way, then if I haven't dealt with the core issues, they're going to manifest in some way, in a different way. But the body and all parts of the psyche really will always be looking for a way to find a solution to the original problem, which is the original traumas, wounds that we're carrying, ancestral wounds that are creating the situation in the first place. And I mean, I knew that. That's what I teach. But in a way, was such a big thing for me that I had to get there through sharing this with you and trying to sort of see where I was at with it all. I'm still giving up sugar. And I don't even want to say the word giving up. I'm still making the choices that are based on my health and on the fact that I have been working for many years on these wounds rather than the old habits. And that's where I'm at. And I think it's maybe different for some people. But what I realize as well is, yes, I'm going to get sugar cravings, and I've had some, not very strong yet, or I've been able to deal with them very well. Yes, I've seen that my body is detoxing from sugar. But what I feel like this time, and maybe I'll eat my words, but what I feel like this time is that instead of going on that habitual journey of not believing in my own strength and the strength that it's taken the last 20 years to get me here, if I ignore that and just go into the pattern of, oh, I'm a sugar addict, it's going to be so hard, I'm going to have to do all these things, then I'm denying my own place. I'm denying where I am actually at. And I don't want that to sound egotistical. I just want to share that my journey has been so deep the last 20 years, culminating in the last 5 years after a cancer diagnosis and meeting my soul partner and really putting my work into the world, that I believe I'm here not through willpower, not through the need to sort of control my diet, but because I don't need sugar anymore. I don't actually need it, because the underlying reasons for that addiction and the red wine have actually been dealt with. So I dealt with them, but I was still hanging on, still attached to the old patterns. So what I'm actually doing is really, by opening up to you and to the world, seeing that this is the old patterns, and now I just need to be the new me. So that's really where I'm at. And now Florian, my husband, is a psychiatrist, and he's actually a trauma and addiction specialist. And we have taught classes on addiction. And the heart of what we teach is that, so instead of willpower, what we need to do to, and I don't want to say deal with, but to relieve ourselves from addictive behaviors, is to live our personal myth. Now, that's what I believe I'm really being shown that I'm doing, and that's why the old patterns don't have any power anymore. And I've been working on coming from a place of personal myth for a long time. So I'm very grateful to my soul and my psyche for actually showing me that I'm here, that's what I'm doing now. And that's the work I want to share with others and bring into the world. I don't need to put myself into the place of, oh dear, I don't know what I'm doing. How am I going to deal with the sugar thing? Actually, don't need to. That is an old way. That is the old me. And where I am in my life is a strong place. I've done the work. So personal myth is a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because in a way, by confronting our biggest core wounds and traversing them, the gift of that is that we step into who we are authentically and we live our personal myth. The chicken and egg situation is the fact that in order to do that, you need to be in contact with your personal myth. So in a way, you have to fake it until you make it, really. So you have to really try and be as authentic as you can, try and be truthful to yourself, try to listen to all parts of your psyche until eventually the wound leads you through it. And that can take some years, usually does take some years. And eventually it's small cycles, these little cycles that you hardly see and you think, I'm not getting anywhere, and suddenly you're in that place that you dreamt of. So I was thinking maybe I'll share a little bit of my journey with sugar, the hypothyroidism, and the red wine, and personal myth. So you can see, because my question to you is, what is holding you back? What is making you do these repetitive things like eating sugar, drinking alcohol, binge eating, whatever it is? And how are you going to live your personal myth so that you get to a point that you don't need those things? So I've been triggered very recently by this hypothyroid diagnosis of high TSH, which means that my thyroid is not working well enough, and so it's hypo. And let's start this story actually at the beginning. So one of the things I've been embarrassed about a little bit about my sharing on these last few days is that I'm actually a trained clinical herbalist, and I trained in the biggest herbal institution in Europe, and then I became a teacher at that school, and it was really my life. And so I found myself confronted with lots of people giving me advice about herbs and bitters and diet, and I felt like, well, I should know all this. I mean, I learned all this. I have files and files of it. This is really what I was trained to do, in part. And here I am, not really getting it, not really feeling it. And I realized it took me back to a memory of when I was teaching at the herbal school. And in France, the herbal education is extremely science-based and clinically based. One of the reasons being, I believe, is because each European country dealt with things like the witchcraft persecution, the witch persecutions in Europe during the 15th and 16th century differently. So when I was a kid at school, we learned about them I think I was about 14, 15 years old, suddenly woke up in the history lesson because something worthwhile and interesting was being taught rather than, another faceless king and his heroic journey. There was something that really resonated. And we spent, I think, a sort of term on learning about what happened to women who were burnt and drowned as witches. France, I lived there for 25 years, and I felt that they had done what the French do well, in a way, which was just pushing it under the surface. It didn't happen. Let's not talk about it. It was difficult. We don't want to deal with it. Let's not talk about it. I think even some plants were taken out of, old books, or when books were reprinted, they left out plants like rue, which was used by women for helping women abort, for example. Anyway, so I was living in this environment where I was teaching herbalism to people who were going to leave the school, but it was illegal to become a herbalist. And so all that to say, the education was very science-based, very clinical, so that this fear that had been pushed into the shadow of being burdened in the marketplace or drowned in the village pond as a witch was still very much alive. What's in the shadow has so much more power than what we can actually see and integrate and understand. So this powerful shadow of this unintegrated trauma from the past was really strong. Plus the French are very sort of worried about cults. So that's why the school was an extremely, we really were scientific and clinical. And I tried to follow that, and I did well, and I learned it all, and I taught it. But underneath, my desire, my focus was really on the underlying reasons, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, for people's illness and disease and symptoms. And so what I did in order to, one, I was a foreigner, two, I didn't want to be burnt in the marketplace either. So what I did is I kind of integrated this way of working with my students in the practical work that I was doing. So I was teaching field botany, herbal medicine making, and herbal gardening. And we would work on very practical things and at the same time weave into it some of the more subtle, magical aspects of plant medicine and healing. And I'm not saying that any other way is wrong. I think the grounding that the clinical and scientific basis gave me was amazing. And, one of my very good herbal friends, Rosalie de la Forêt, is an amazing herbalist with what's happening now, with the material, with the medicine, with the cooking. And I honor her for that. I think it's brilliant. We sort of mirror each other. I just wanted to say that this is my way of seeing the world. It's not the way, it's not the right way. It's just the way that my healing medicine comes out into the world. So I wove it in with my pupils. So if we were doing, making root medicine, we would be digging up the roots, cleaning the roots, and working on our ancestral stories, working on our how grounded we were, et cetera, et cetera. If we were planting seeds, maybe we'd be working on our creative projects, our intentions for where we were going and what we were going to be creating in our lives, et cetera, et cetera. And I did a lot of work on the wounded healer. So when I was doing these videos, I sort of felt like I should know all this stuff. I'm really disconnected from the real herbal knowledge. I use herbs magically in a way, and the oils. I use them to work on accessing parts of myself, the unconscious, the shadow, the deeper parts of myself that I can't access with the analytical mind or the left brain. I have to find other tools, and so this is how I use plants and oils and nature, really. So I was feeling a little bit like, I'm really vulnerable here. And then my psyche showed me that the way that I see healing and medicine in the world is the way that is integrated into my personal myth. So one of the things that I find very interesting is also a thing called biological decoding, which is big in France. It was, I think, a guy called Christian Flesch brought it into France from Germany in the early 90s. In English, I've seen books called A Biogenealogy, which is based on this biological decoding. And really it is looking at the underlying conflicts, emotional reasons, ancestral messages that have been interpreted by the body that come through as illness and disease. So I looked up hypothyroidism, and it was no surprise to find that, of course, it's to do with feeling that you haven't got enough time. You're always being raced to do something. And as I tuned into this, I realized that this is a very familiar thing for me. Even when I'm on holiday or relaxed, there's like this internal clock that says there's not enough time. You must do this, and you must do this, and you must do this. And it's very hard for me to sort of combat that. So it made a lot of sense. And I've been working with that. It wasn't until this morning that I realized that this isn't mine. This is really an ancestral message. And because I'm the end of my mother line, and I'm the only and first person in the mother line to be born out of India, and my ancestors were sort of ripped away from the family tree, and we weren't allowed to talk about where we came from, and there was a lot of trauma there from colonization, I realized that I have a very, very strong connection with those ancestors now, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons why I'm still alive, and their energy is what I think I replaced with sugar because I was cut off from it. Anyway, that's for a bit later. First of all, I realized that it was my ancestors that felt there wasn't enough time. There was an urgency. They needed to connect with me in order to heal the lineage together. They were doing their work the other side of the veil. I had work to do here, so that life and life force could come back through that lineage in the way that it's supposed to. So that urgency, I understood this morning. And I realized that once again, my life's work is about healing the mother line. That is what saved my life. That's what I know intricately well how to do. And that's what I want to share with the world. And here I was sharing my problem with sugar from a point of view that didn't come from my personal myth. That is my personal myth. So today, what I'm trying to say, and I said I'd ramble, but I know that we're getting there. What I'm trying to say is, by looking at this problem and living the solution to the problem, that is my personal myth. And the signs and the symbols and the way that I do it, the signposts that I take, both internally and externally, are unique to me. We all have our personal myth. So I think my message is, what is your personal myth? Because that's at the heart. Understanding it and working with it and going layer after layer through it is what is at the heart of healing addiction. And so realizing this morning that my ancestors had this urgency, I could let it go because I have done the work. That's what the last years of my life have been about. And the sugar thing comes in very well, and the red wine, because the sugar and the red wine replace the haminja. And the haminja is a Nordic word, and it really means, people interpret it as good luck. But what it actually means in its ancient form is the feminine energy that comes through from the ancestral lineage. And it's the vital life force that comes through from that and pushes you into the world and supports you and guides you in the world. So in a way it is luck, because each of our lineages has its own vital life force, good or bad, strong or weak, needing strengthening or not. And that's what is our birthright. So in a way, from birth, and also because of the heart of my lineage's wound, is that the mother line was denied throughout, from my great-grandmother onwards. So what I did is I went for sugar, and I was fed sugar by my mother, who did the same thing, because we'd lost contact with what is really our nurturing, supporting true parent, which is this energy from the Mother Earth through your mother line, and it supports you and pushes you into life. So what do I realize? First, I've done the work. I know what that energy is. I feel it. I can tune into it. But the habit of sugar and red wine was still dominant, because I needed to realize all this in order to say, well, that's gone. That is the ghost now. In the past, in my life, the ghosts were the echoes of the trauma, because I was unconscious of it. My work has been making all this conscious. I could tell you this hidden story of my mother line in every single detail. I know everything about it. I had to in order to piece it back together and mend the forbidden story. And now the real ghost is how I used to be, is the sugar and the need for red wine. And interesting how, I think I said in an earlier video, each one of our specific substances that we feel drawn to or uncontrolled with has a symbolism to it. And what's the symbolism of red wine? You know, that was my love substance. And, you know, I didn't drink a lot, but I loved a glass of red wine. Well, red wine, blood, the lineage, that's what was cut. That was the separation. And I replaced it. I'm getting emotional because it's so obvious. And I mean, I knew that intellectually, but I had to come here and share all this with you and be there flaying about, trying to be, you know, trying to, like, this is what it is to stop sugar. No, I'm there. And that's my message, is 20 years of working on healing myself, my lineage, and finding my personal myth. I don't have to do a journey of, you know, force or, I just need to be me. I have let it go. My psyche's let it go. Okay, so I did ramble, but I'm hoping that makes some sense. It's like a circumambulation I've done in this week that I've been sharing with you. And it was through going into the uncomfortable feelings. It even came by sitting here and not really knowing what my story was, that I realized this is my work, this is my life's work, and I've done it for myself. And I think, lastly, you know, I've just finished a mentorship where Florian and I were teaching 20 people for 6 months. And it was a really beautiful group of people. It was a very powerful mentorship. We were holding space for teaching, learning, and healing. And I realized that, you know, just after the mentorship, what am I left with? My own, what's the word? I had to come here, expose myself in order to see my own strength. And the word I chose at the beginning of the mentorship was strength. So all I can do is thank you for holding space for me, thank my ancestors for having never given up and powered through that urgency to connect with me, and the universe for being such a magical place. Thank you.